Welcome to the Mindful Movement Show. We're your hosts, Tony and Amanda Johnson.
This is a podcast dedicated to helping moms and dads heal their hurts, transform their health from the inside out, and become the best people, partners, and parents they can possibly be.
Our mission is to normalize struggle and profile stories of resilience, character building, and the process of healing and becoming.
In Season 1, we spotlight healers from a variety of modalities who are also parents. We hope you enjoy the show. Hello, happy Mindful Monday to all of you out there. It is my pleasure and honor to welcome you to the next episode of the Mindful Movement Show. We are so grateful today for today's guests. His name is Ignacio Evans, and he is a dear friend of mine for over a decade. He is a PhD student in communication and rhetorical studies at University of California, San Diego. He is also a father, a national championship debater and debate coach, and a shining example of wisdom, resilience, and perseverance that we can all learn something from. His professional expertise is in advocacy, diversity, leadership, and public speaking. He is an expert at building curriculum to meet students where they are and help them level up their performance and knowledge. Like I said, I've known Iggy for almost 15 years now. We met at the Wyoming Forensics Institute in the summer of 2005. Since that time, we've competed against one another in college debate. We've coached high school debate together, and we've spent many nights talking about the world and the ways in which we can achieve what others might deem impossible. As I said, we're super excited to have him on the podcast. In this episode, we will discuss his background and scholarship, specifically looking at the most recent presentation he made on Black parenting and impossibility to explore the ways in which race implicates constructions of what it means to be a good and a bad parent. We'll also dream together about what it would be like to live in a world where everyone cared about Black life with audacity and created moments and futures and of what the Black kids that we all care about. So welcome, Iggy. It's a pleasure to have you.
Welcome.
I'm happy to be here.
Oh, what's
Man,
that?
that's like a long intro. I'm just like, ooh, that was me. That was us.
A lot of people have said, I'm going to need to borrow that from you, and so I can put it on my website, please. So I'll send it over your way if you'd like. But we're excited to have you. I know that our listeners will benefit a great deal from our conversation. You're one of the most down-to-earth people I've ever met, and I learn every time we have a conversation. And so I'm blessed to be able to share that with the Mindful and Fit family. So how you doing today? You're still in San Diego right now?
Right now, I'm actually visiting a family in Fullerton. It's like, the responsibility of being a co-parent / partner, doing the things, making it all work.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. And, we'll get into that in great detail about what it's like to co-parent and what it's like to co-parent from a distance. But before we do that, I want to kind of open the floor for you to introduce yourself, share your story. Part of our show is normalizing struggle and profiling teachers, coaches, authors, and their stories of resilience and becoming. And we understand that our experiences shape who we are and how we show up in the world. So I'd just like to give you a few moments to share some of the formative experiences that shape how you show up as a student, a teacher, a coach, a parent, and a partner.
Ooh. You hit the things. For me, showing up means that I have to be present, right? And so presence is a big part of how I show up. It's not just that I show up. And so showing up as a father, for example, showing up as an educator, and showing up as a person that I can be proud of are almost one and the same, right? And so when we ask about experiences that shape those, I can easily tell you, sure, I was homeless. I can easily tell you, sure, um, I was in very precarious situations that most people would have folded under. But what I will tell you is that I was always in situations that were loving, regardless of how dangerous or reckless the situations were. And that's one of the things I began to not only begin to shape, but I also try to pour it into every other space I'm in. So as a father, I try to be a father wherever I go, right? Like I'll never take off my father hat. And so um it's not that I father everyone, for example, but instead the kind of care that I would have for my daughter, I reserve for random regular people. Um, the care that I have, and I've been practicing for years before I had my daughter. So that care is something that my daughter is a recipient of at least 25 years of active care. um, and that's kind of, those are kind of like the basis of what ground me. Like I can give you so much more. Like, and I know your readers and your listeners are like, oh my God, what kind of individual is he? And for me, it's just like, look, I come from Baltimore. I come from a place that, folks would like to forget. But like I said, even in those spaces, it's the love and care. It is the patience that you have with folks to reach impossible spaces, right? And so that kind of impossibility for me wasn't like some pie in the sky word. It was like the thing that they told us every day that we were going to have to deal with as black, as and then insert, whether it be queer or otherwise, right? And so as a black father who stands in a whole bunch of spaces, um, I try not to cut off who I am in any of those spaces. And in fact, I would love for them, and I work so that all of them can touch each other, right? It's important not to compartmentalize yourself as a parent. Y'all know that. Y'all literally would be stretched thin if you did. And that's something that I had to learn as a person, but also as a parent.
And there's so many powerful things that you said there, and I want to help restate it. So, the power of presence, the power of love, care, and patience to shape not only how you show up, but the affect and the influence that you have in the room as a father in whatever situation you find yourself in. And I got to tell you, as someone who's coached alongside you, who's gotten beat really bad in debates by you, who's seen you coach other people and to greatness, your presence is something that is just an innate gift that has an ability to transform a room. When you talk, people listen. And so I want to get into a little bit more of your story in terms of we can begin by discussing. I mean, you're a leading scholar on and you're pursuing what it means to create these impossible situations or to dream these impossible realities. But I kind of want to start at the beginning, and maybe we can talk about it in the context of being homeless or living in Baltimore, but introducing our audience to concepts of anti-Blackness and of the ways in which race shapes our social relations and the ways that we interact with one another. Because to be truthful, I'm not sure that a lion's share of our audience has a great deal of exposure or awareness of that reality. So, I'll kind of I know that's a big question, but like maybe talk about how your upbringing and experiences are shaped by anti-Blackness as a way to introduce the concept.
Yeah. Whew. I'll say this. My upbringing in a lot of ways was my parents fighting to figure out how to raise black children, right? Like I was raised in a two-parent household for to some degree. Um, but around teenage years that began to become extremely difficult. And when I say that, it's like how do you raise little black boys in a world in which special education classes are shaping not only the narrative around whether your boys are going to be violent, you're dealing with literally being introduced to ADHD and no one else is helping you. Like school is not like they're not giving you things. And in fact, like I said, like I remember as a child, the quickest thing that they would tell me and my brother is that we need IEPs, right? And that these IEPs wasn't filled with let me help you. It was let me push your kid into special places. And those special places is things that we got to fight from.
Mm.
Like my parents were dealing with, all right, look, we want to give our children Christmas, but MCI WorldCom during my childhood laid my parents off. So what does it mean to then get laid off right before Christmas and you got bills, a car, and Christmas? There's a whole nother bill, right? What does it mean to provide an adequate lifestyle for like literally growing black and then potentially insert what that means, right? And I say this because as little black boys, we were described as violent, like we were described as hopeless. We were described as a whole
Mm.
bunch of things, and it's not to say that me and my brother were like terrorists or anything. We were little boys. We weren't going around like doing things that you wouldn't consider any other little boy doing, with the exception that we were black, and we were in a place where black and young meant trouble. I don't care if you were boy, girl, or trans. Like black
Mm.
and young meant trouble. You were into something. If you were not next to an adult, you were literally going to be in trouble minutes later. And growing up in that
Yeah.
environment, it teaches you. Like I'm also dyslexic, right? And so going to school, for example, and dealing with that, folks didn't want to deal with that. And,
Mm.
and in fact, I was either over emotional or something to be contained, right? And so when your kids are coming home,
Mm.
right, and they are all of these things but your kids, it is hard then to be like, all right, well, I'm going to raise you because there's a level of care that I have for you, but I also have to defend you from the world. That defense from the world is one in which my parents, I mean, I thought they did a great job, right? Because I'm still breathing. Shout out to them, and shout out to some lucky moments. But I say that because I think that when we get into raising children, we get into the conversation of being an adult and the parent because they're not the same.
Mm.
I think it's
Yeah.
really important to then mark out what is then deemed possible in the kind of register you move around in, right? Like for my parents, the impossibility was, can I raise these kids and they would be loving, caring individuals who don't have long rap sheets, right? It
Yeah.
then situates your kids in a lot of ways to be really, really problematic responsibilities, right? As opposed to your loved ones, right? As opposed to um, kids that you care for and love, like that you literally, we go from the little kids who are the things that are hugging legs, ankles, and arms that bring that weird joy that you can only get from that little thing that you produce or that you pour all your money into, your broke best friend, that kind of thing. Imagine if you don't have that, right? Because your kid is then a problem, right? You don't get that same kind of
Mm.
joy that we oftentimes, after a long work day, depending on what you do for work, you like, oh my God, I'm home. Whew, kids. And to some degree, my parents did a great job of balancing whatever that was, because you always get parts of your parents when they're going through things, when they're raising you. You get parts of them. You get the smiles, you
Mm.
get the cares, and sometimes you get the outbursts, but a lot of the times you get the rawest manicured version you can possibly have. And I know that seems like an oxymoronic statement, but that's what children usually get, which is parents usually come to their kids trying to put themselves together in such a way that the world would never see, right? Only for their kids. And my parents did just that. But what does it mean to do that in an anti-black world? That's kind of wild. And what I mean by that is it's not just, oh, well, the world has misfortunes for black folks. What I'm speaking to here, and when I say anti-blackness, I'm talking about a ubiquitous system that is unrelenting, right? A ubiquitous system that is senseless, right? There is no rhyme or reason to the things; they just happen. And so, if your whole life and the life you choose to produce is under that same kind of duress, the kind of duress that says that you are shaped and named before you can say what your shape and your name is, right? I used to explain to people all the time. If my burden as a black person is to uphold the race when I step outside my house, and your burden is to care about you, right? That says that there's a difference in how we have to live our lives. I say that that difference is anti-blackness, right? I have to defend whether I'm going to be an honorable black person before I can even be trusted or you learn my actual name, right? That
Mm.
was what my mom and daddy are like raising to deal with. And this is not to speak of, things like drug addictions, right? How to cope with feeling like, oh, I may be an inadequate person, whether it be black or otherwise. I feel like an inadequate black parent. I feel like, and then insert here, because black people have a range of feelings from the experiences of anti-blackness, and those ranges of feelings are things that are not talked about. Not because, oh, people don't have podcasts, because they do, right? But a part of the time is that black parenting is something that is seen to be very insular, right? A phrase that happened in my home, and I don't know if it happens in other homes, but when it happened in my home was whatever happens in our house stays in our house, right? And so I know that that's true for black parenting too. They oftentimes, unless they whispering about how my child, and then insert them in where they holding the forehead with the Mackay Fife over here, it's like, minus that, right? Minus that, black parents oftentimes are not speaking to anyone else about how to parent, how to care about the
Interesting.
worldly things, like how to make ends meet, plus being like, dang, am I good? Right? Like I get my child up, I make sure they go to school, I make sure they care about X, Y, and Z, but am I a good parent though? And that's something that's asked every day.
Mhm.
Right. And I know that that's true, regardless of racial or economic situations, right? Or gender, right? Because I know moms and dads um ask themselves, am I good for my kid? Am I good enough for my kid? Right. And so
Sure.
Mm.
though, like that's what subtended my childhood. I think that these are things that not only help me grow, but also put in perspective what kind of parent I wanted to be. Right. And I say this because
Yeah.
I'm gonna be perfectly honest with you. All the accolades that got named, right? Like all the things that kind of introduced me into the things, I didn't care about none of them. Like not growing up, right? Even my biggest accomplishment is becoming a father, right? It is not getting accepted into PhD school. It won't be getting my degree. It won't be getting my job with my degree. It wasn't the 7-time national championships that I won. Like none of those things, right? What actually hit me was I seen my daddy, and he did the best he possibly could. He didn't birth me. Like I'm not from his sack, but he one of my favorite people, right? Like I'm one of the favorite mistakes that he always make. Like, and so I say that because he recommits to me. Like my daddy be like, I don't know if this is the thing, but I'm doing it anyway. And so for me, that gave me a thing to hold on to, right? Like I could be a whole dad, right? That care and could provide. I don't know. As a child, I was like, wow, you didn't birth me, but you definitely is someone who, if I died today or tomorrow, I would have been glad to the utmost to say I've known you, right? And then taking that notion of fatherhood, for example, and being like, okay, so anywhere on the map you still my daddy. Like I don't care where I go, what I do, and then so much so that I know that you're my dad because you show up, right? Um, you show up in ways that no one else thinks to do. Right? Like I can hear you in my thoughts. I can like hear myself saying the words you used to say to me. Right? I can hear you in the kind of joy that I bring to my daughter. Right? The corny dad re ad libbing songs. Right? My daddy was a DJ. Right? And so it's like dad joke but on 1,000 just with the song. This is great.
That's
Yeah, I
beautiful.
mean, but I also like, and I say this because given that I had to deal with a lot of trauma, a lot of therapy, um, the thing I will say and I can say is that my mama also like contributed exactly to who I am, right, and to how I am a parent, right. I am whole, right? When I say this, is because she like my heart. My daddy gave me a whole bunch of the logical things, and he grounds me as a parent. But my mama's my heart. She teaches me that, like, even as a parent, we're supposed to be whole people, right? And the thing that I think that most children who grow up, even to be parents, never really do is forgive their parents. They never forgive their parents for the kind of environments that they had to grow up in. Like, sure, as a parent, you had hit the I will do this even if it's for a moment kind of like thing when you decided to have kids. You're like, yes, there was a thing that you said you're sure for most parents, right? It's like, yeah, sure. Whatever that yeah was, it happened. And so doing that, I think that for me, my daddy instilled, as well as my mama instilled in me, like this whole notion that if you're gonna do it on purpose. And what that means is do it with
Yeah.
purpose, right? So it meant that, like, okay, before I was thinking about having a child, can I financially support this child? Boop, concern number one. Concern number two, this child is a lifetime commitment. Am I okay with the person I'm making this child with to be here for life? Even if I don't like them, even if they get on my nerves, even if I find something out about via my child that they are doing. Wow, okay, cool. Yep. And then the last part in a lot I know, like,
Okay.
but the last part for me then is a question of like, okay, can the person I'm going to produce this child with take serious a lot of the things that I had to deal with? Because my child is going to have to deal with those same things, even if they're not from the place that I was from. Right. And
Mm.
so that was one of the like the hard things. It's like, yeah, I'm from a place where if you're not careful, it's easy to start unloving people. Right. And so what does it mean for my child to have like her anger fits and realize that that's also part of her too? Right. But being able to have the tools, it's like, yeah, sure. I spent a long time working and unworking some of those things. Right. And so my child now has to contend with having the same battles or very similar battles and me being able to provide some of the resources that my folks couldn't. Right. My daddy had one phrase that
Yeah.
sticks in my head: think before you react. I took that one phrase and like did everything with it. um, and so I give my daughter a lot more tools, right, to deal with her mental health, to deal with how
Mm.
she's processing things. But also as a parent, like I can teach my child that it's okay to be a full person from this parenting perspective, as opposed to waiting till my child get 25 and be like, yeah, I'm sorry for your childhood. It was a lot. My bad. I was a growing adult. Oops. Like the new age parents right now are apologizing for all of childhood of like for a whole bunch of things. And I don't want to wait till my kid get old and be like, my bad. Right. I want to be able to in real time
Mm-hmm.
be like, oh, actually, didn't mean to do that. And that was like generational trauma. I'm sorry. Right. Unworking some of those things that make black households. And I know that that's a controversial statement. But I say that because it's not that I think there's something wrong with black households. No, but I also think that the thing that is great about any working household is that it is flexible, right? It does not
Mm.
make itself iconic for the sake of existence. That's cute, right? But that's how a whole bunch of families become dysfunctional, right? Whether it be the kid don't
Yeah.
likes the parents or the parents don't like the kid, like insert whatever scenario you got. But a part of that is because that inner family drama don't nobody want to deal with, right? And so the thing that I think that focusing, for example, on how power dynamics of the outside world can construct and oftentimes do construct how you have your home, it is drastically
Mm-hmm.
important for the people who are deciding to make the home to be aware of those not only power struggles, but then what does it mean to impact your home, right? Like me and the mother of my child have this
Mm-hmm.
conversation all the time about my child goes to like a pretty white school. Where are we gonna make friends? Like
Yeah.
what are we gonna do? And so I go, I'm not talking to those people. I'm not doing it. And then I look at her face and I realize that that is a racial labor that she's going to have to deal with, which means
Mm.
that she didn't sign up for this by herself. And this is not just a burden of women
Mm-hmm.
doing the women thing. All right, I'll smoosh with the white people too. Ah, but it's not just smoozing. It is also being like, hey, yo, we're going to inform our kids' friends' parents how to be around black people. Right, because at some
Mm-hmm.
point we would like
Yes.
for our kid to be able to go to a pool party and we not have to be black chaperones plus black parents, right? And be like, all right,
Yeah.
Yes.
oh, how do we do this? And so, like, I remember one time we rock paper scissors it. We're like, all right, your turn. You're going to get it. I'm not doing it with them today. But a part of that was because we're like, we're trying to negotiate the level of patience that it takes to show up fully. And if one of us is angry because of something that happened at work, or these people really just have an
Mm-hmm.
ugly history of communicating poorly with black folks, and that's euphemism, then what are we gonna do? Right? Like we're gonna have to do something. And I mean, the something sometimes is yes, my daughter can't play with y'all because I don't trust y'all. Not the kid, but y'all. Like my kid can't be in your house. Like, sure. But then the
Mm-hmm.
next
Yeah.
level of that is being aware of, all right, we're in California. To have or to own land, it's like the most luxurious thing ever. So if your friend has a pool in their backyard, it's like, whoop, okay.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Um,
You speak
and
to
coming to grips with,
so many things. Go
yeah,
ahead.
no,
I'm so
no, go
sorry.
ahead,
Go
go ahead.
ahead.
You just spoke to so many things
Oh
that
my
we need to
gosh.
reflect and make
Yes.
sure that are heard and understood and reinforced. And I know that you could literally wax poetic the entire time, but part of this is also like, whoa, you're speaking to so many just wisdom points of
Yes.
wisdom
Yes.
that need to be unpacked. So go ahead.
So one of my kind of follow-up questions for you, talking about generational trauma, and I really value and appreciate what you said about how, regardless of if that happened to that child or not, it happened to you, and you're bringing that into your relationship with them. And I'm curious, you were talking about parenting through generational trauma. And I was wondering if you could speak a little bit more to what that looks like for you and your relationship with your child. And I also really valued what you said about the ability as an adult to, and as a parent, to be able to still apologize to your child and have examples of what that looks like. So if you can just kind of speak to or unpack those two things a little bit, I really wanted to highlight that
Yeah.
for our listeners for sure.
I guess this kind of like I'll rope them together, if you will. Um,
Okay.
One time I'm having a conversation with my daughter about one of her favorite peoples, her Mima. Right? She's like, yeah, Mima is great, Mima, and I'm kind of like, man, Mima is great now. I'm so envious of you. Like, ooh, oh, that's up, man. Oh man. And I get into a conversation with my daughter about what my mom was like when I was her age. And my daughter kind of like went down the
Yeah.
rabbit hole. She was like button, button, button. At first it was cute. And then it was like, oh yeah, I remember that. And then it was like, oh yeah, all right, cool. Fast forward 2 more years and you're asking me about a time period where my mom spent like a month to 2 months not at the crib. Like she just not home. Um, and I mean, later I found out it was due to drug addiction or whatever. But it was like really hard to stomach that, and so it shaped a lot of um, who I became. And I'm telling my daughter this, like, yeah, having to figure out things where your mom either says things to you or she goes about her business and you're not her business. Like, how do you then go about your world?
Yeah.
And my daughter's kind of inquiring,
Yeah.
she pushing, and she comes to like a degree. It's like, hold up, Mima left you? No, 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 not Mima. Like, no.
Yeah.
And then kind of storms off on me and was like, ah. But then my mom was also in the house because we had invited her for like, the holidays, whatever. And my daughter's like, "Ugh, I'm going to tell you about yourself today." And I'm like, "Oh, that was kind of wild. Yeah, I'm going to take out this trash real quick. Cool, cool, cool." I come back and the conversation's still going. And literally, my 7-year old is going toe to toe with my mother and being like, "How dare you? I can't believe it." And so I decided to stop being
Okay.
irresponsible and join in because my daughter is like dying. No. And
Yeah.
as a result, it
Yeah.
was like, okay, let me explain to you that yes, this is true. My mama got mad and pulled me to the side like after this and was like, "Ah, that," and I was like, you know what? My daughter get to confront you and ask you about things that she wasn't here or around to see. That's fair.
Yeah.
What I always reminded my daughter though is that shout out to you being a way better grandmother than you were at mom. And
Mm.
shout out to me having enough patience to be like, "Hey, yo, you get to do that." Right. For me, the
Yeah.
circle back around
Absolutely.
was the engaging in the generational trauma, right? Like having my daughter engage my mother, but also having me engage my mother after that. Because to some degree, like the reason why we get
Okay.
along, the reason why we had progressed is because we didn't talk about it. Slash, we talked about it enough.
Yeah.
Right. And so the thing that was comforting for me was that my daughter was going to get at aspects that I never could. Right? And a part of that is because she lived.
Sure.
Like, this is what I was doing it for. Right. And so it is another thing to see the next generation have a conversation with you, even though you think they're too young to do such. But in that same
Yeah.
token, it was the apology that I wanted, right? Like my daughter produced a lot of those things, and it wasn't to say that like I depended on my daughter
Yeah.
for the emotional and spiritual relief that came via this situation. But I don't know if I would have had this kind of closure without my daughter actually having the engagement that she did. To be honest, right? And so
Wow.
that level of all right, cool, I could forgive you. She forgave you, even though she's still mad. And you also forgave me for the embarrassment that you had, like literally had to deal with. That small child is ferocious. Shout out to my child. And aggressive.
Get
Yes.
it, girl.
Raising strong women, I love it.
Yes.
But that was like,
And to
go
your
ahead.
point, to your point, I think in our society, healing requires having the conversation and being open to forgiveness. And modeling that for our children is the most, in my view, the most essential thing we can do as parents, whether it be an interracial dynamic at a backyard pool party where you're mustering the courage or the patience to engage people who you might not necessarily on your own, or it be encouraging a mediation between your bold, courageous daughter and your mom, right? Modeling that ability to listen, to forgive, and to work toward a process of healing. And honestly, man, you talked about so many things that I would like to follow up on. And we're going to have you on again because I actually want to transition to talk about your, and it's all relevant, right? Your most recent conference presentation at the Rhetoric Society of America conference last May. You delivered a talk. Can you kind of tell us more about the contents of that talk and you know what's ahead for you in this area of research?
Yeah. Right now, I do have like pinned to the top of my Facebook that video at the conference, which was named "Niggatry and Subtitles: Niggas and Impossibility and Possible Nigga Worlds." Right, like thinking about that piece, thinking about that conference, and the rest of like this is also going to be a chapter in my dissertation that's going to be out. Whew. In 3 years. Woo, right. um, this research is, uh, man, it's like my parenting in a nutshell, if you will. A part of it is that I'm taking what does it mean to think about the race question that is raised in black homes. Like, all right, cool, you're able to go outside. What does it mean that you're black? Black people have been having this conversation in our
Yeah.
homes and keep having them at different age markers. They have them for different genders and gender expressions inside of the home. All of these, like literally, that black question is a thing. And so for me, I wanted to ask that question in the face of, or not even in the face, but in the reality of black kids are oftentimes the first ones on, like, in the face of like any civil disobedience, black youth, right? And so for me, it was raising this
Sure.
question of, because being from Baltimore, when the Baltimore riots slash uprisings happened, this was kind of like the knee jerk reaction that I'm having because I'm a community member, but I'm also a father. I'm also a caregiver for the youth in the community. And then, so what does it mean for me to then
Sure.
theorize a space, right? To theorize a world in which those parents can be not only a part of those kids' lives, but not be like disjointed, right? Like to not be pushed out or any space. And so thinking about the impossible question was, what is the burden that black parents deal with when raising black kids, right? And impossibility was the first thing that came to my mind. I'm sitting here with Bebe's kids, right? And I'm like, wow, I don't know if I could have raised Bebe's kids. Like I rub my forehead all the time. Like I don't know. I don't know. Um, and so the I don't know for me begged the question because Bebe's kids is like the hyper capitulation of black children writ large, right? And then starting with could and how do you raise these kids? Sure, we only get like an episodic relationship to them, but for me, it was a I'm a dare to imagine how can we, right? And so getting into that kind of work, it really was okay. Um, I think that we say a lot of things out loud, and we need to have a conversation about how Black folks say things in subtitles. Sure, this is kind of like a riff off one of my favorite battle rapper Sue Surf when he was like, "Do you want me to say it in subtitles or something?" Granted, if you missed the reference, it's okay. But my point here is that the reason why he puts things in subtitles is to re-say a thing that he has already said, but to give it a different relationship, a different complexion, if you will. And so I thought to do the same thing with Black parenting. I wanted to take the conversation of Black parenting as not a positive or a negative, but to take it out of that frame where people get to be like, I think it's good or bad. Because I realized that I firsthand know the damage it has on the psyches of black parents. Like, I don't know if I'm good or bad. That feels horrible. Right. And it feels like you're almost
Yeah.
like being like, a manic depressant with how you feel about your parenting, right? Like one day you're super great.
Mm.
Yay! I'm doing the best thing I can because I got up and I gave my kid breakfast. But about time lunchtime comes, you feel like the worst parent ever because you didn't eat during breakfast, and so you don't have enough energy, and you start to beat yourself up. One of the things I always say to folks is that, like, especially black people, like I say this to black people all the time. If the world is anti-black, you ain't got to put hands and feet on you. The world is already kicking and like punching on you. Why do extra? And so my work is considering what is that extra? Let's account for that. But then also, what is the terrain for black parents being black parents? Right. A part of I touched on earlier is about this apology question. Black parents are notorious for not apologizing to their kids. Like, what? Atlanta even has a segment about how this black mom won't apologize to her black son, and then he goes on this journey about, well, I'm not going to eat that spaghetti you told me to eat for the 13th time tonight. Like, I'm not doing it. And so, the whole time, Yo goes on this journey, and it's crazy. And for me, that journey wasn't
Yeah.
foreign. Like, granted, I'm like when my mom would say eat that food, I was going to eat that food. I'm not Yo, but at the same token, when children make decisions, parents oftentimes be like, do you have the right to say that? Do you have the right to do that? For me, that led me down a rabbit hole
Mm-hmm.
of, conscious parenting and do children have rights? I ain't really know how to answer that question. I'm an Afro pessimist. I don't believe in rights, not in that way. And so having to not only reacclimate myself to a different kind of parenting where the children can say things with opinions and they should be warranted.
Yeah.
Um, like I remember, like it was an old debate person who had a conversation with me, and our kids were around the same age, and I literally just talked. I was like, you know what, maybe I can cross the pond and be like, let me ask you for some advice, white man who had more than one kid that I had. Okay, let me ask you. Kid's like 4. Do you believe your kid? And he goes, no. Little kids are liars. And I go, what? The consequence to believe my kid is at a higher rate here. If my kid tell me something today or tomorrow, that little black girl, like little girl, is going to be believed until it's too late. Like I don't know what to tell you. And so thinking about that was
Yeah.
like, okay, I have to trust my kid at a next level. Hmm.
Mm.
Okay, my kid get to be conscious, meaning that they have their own thoughts about things, and regardless of how I feel about them or how you have accumulated those thoughts, they're your thoughts and not mine. Um, I have to then be patient with you enough for you to not only develop and cycle through those things, but even for me to call it propaganda. Like I'm good for telling my kid, like, "Hey, yo, you picked it up from somebody else. That's weird." Right. And so I'm good for it. I was like, no, that came out that show. I know what show that it was. And then repeat back to like those things. And so it leads me to be like the third thing I'm usually on top of as this black parent who's choosing the impossible is I'm on top of TV shows. Like we know that there's a large conversation about how bad parenting is a question of you set your kid in front of the TV and then they're just watching it. For me it
Yeah.
was the YouTube Momo stuff where like they had the YouTube person doing inappropriate things on YouTube's kids, right? Instead of having to be on top of that, and it was like this really not that hard. No, my kid can't watch YouTube Kids or YouTube. Okay, right? But people made this whole big deal about how well we need to do special things for our kids. Yeah, if you are not taking your kid outside, then I mean, I don't know what else you want to do. Like, y'all probably in there watching TV and you don't care what they watching, and then they gonna watch that. Duh. But do that make you a black? Do it make you a bad parent if your kid stumbles upon that? Like mine did a number of times, and I go, "Whew, hold temple. I'm not sure if I'm bad or not." And having, for example, the mother of my child be like, "Hey, yo, you're not bad. We're good." And I was like, "Good didn't do it for me." She was right, but good didn't do it for me. It didn't replenish how much the world says you are a bad black parent because of insert, or your parenting is
Mm.
bad because of however people feel this month or whatever. Right. And so having something to feel a
Yeah.
little bit more secure. Right. Then I was like, all right, I'm gonna go to the parenting books. I'm gonna do it. Yeah, that didn't do it for me either. I'm gonna be honest. Um, the thing that made me really upset about parenting, excuse me, about parenting books was that what if you don't want to raise a little capitalist? Like, I just don't. Like, what if you want to raise a kid who cares about the world, who cares about themselves in the world, but don't care about making money as a youth, right? And for me, reading all of these books about, I read like 6 of them. Hey, it pissed me off actually. About how to parent better as a black person. It really was just like you're raising your child to be, and then insert. And I'm like, I'm not raising my child to be none of that. Like, I'm raising my child to care about black people. If your first 3 pages in your book talk about what am I raising my child to do, and it says success, and none of that says care about people, that's not successful.
Mm.
Right. But having to thumb through
Mm.
all of these things to be like, so y'all don't teach us how to raise caring individuals? What's going on here? Like teaching your child empathy? What? But then also like political context. An example of this is that we were in the mall in Atlanta, Greenbrier. We were walking past the Chick-fil-A stand, and it was like 2 cops standing right, like to like right off to the side. And I mean, at the time, insert one of the black murders that happened on television. I don't know who died this week, but somebody died. And my child is kind of like mad, like big mad, actually. Like, and we walking, and the black it's these two police officers are two black people. That's why, like, we're in Atlanta, so obviously they're black, but they're like acting like they're just police. So they're like, "Hi," and my daughter's like, "We don't talk to y'all. Y'all kill black people." And the lady goes, "Whoa," and looking at me like, "Hey, yo, get your kid," and I'm like, "Nah." She believed that all on her own. And so then the male officer goes, "No, we're really good to like black people. We're black." And she goes, "No, you're police." And I go, "Yes,
Oh.
yes, yes."
She's a bold little girl.
But I say that because
Who's conscious and has her own
Yes.
experiences.
Yes.
a part of this is like thinking about how you parent, though. It's about how me and the mother of my child, so like anyone who's around my child, knows that we're not going to sugarcoat any conversation. Anyone, right? Transness, for example, is a common conversation in our household, right? Having a constant conversation about theys and thems, and not just she's and he's,
Mm.
because we we have family members who are trans, and we don't want them to feel uncomfortable, right? But having some people think that it's too
Sure.
early to have a conversation with a child about those things. And I'm like, how about you just have it, and see where it goes? And I say this not because I want people's parenting to be experimental. I'm saying that, like, you learn what a he was, you learn what a she was. They and them, not all that different. And a part of like the parent mind goes,
Yep.
"I'm going to teach my kid about sex before I teach my kid about sex." Oh my God. No, you're not. Just no, you're not. You won't spoil your kid, right? Too early with knowledge that they're not supposed to know. No, you're not.
And if I couldn't jump in real quick, it's really interesting what you're talking about, like having the conversations with your kids early. And in some ways, like I have recently gone through an interesting conversation with our little 2.5 year old um, about gay marriage. And it's like the world hasn't imprinted anything else on her yet. And so, in some ways, being able to have those conversations in my first experience, it's actually a little bit easier because she doesn't have everything else in the world telling her yet that it should be one way. And so I'm curious if, and that has been your experience with things like talking about theys and thems, like where they're less imprinted. Has that been kind of your experience as well?
Absolutely. I mean, so much so that my child now watches her typical shows and wonder why, for example, the little girls aren't hugging each other, and why they always have to find a
Oh.
little boy. Like, these are questions that get to be had, partly because we're kind of like splicing. That doesn't make sense all the time, right? And being very earnest about it, or why
Yeah.
isn't this happening, right? And then being my kid being like, "What, that happens?" And I'm like, "Yeah, yeah, 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 yeah." Right. In the same way in which the world kind of trains, not kind of, but the world trains your children to like what they like in a lot of ways, right? Sure, based on the selections that you
Yeah.
put in front of them, the world then teaches them to like things or to unlike things. For me, the thing that I learned is if you just insert your opinion alongside that without it being a blanket statement, you're more likely to influence your child to be like, "So what does that mean?" Or just the engagement that
Yeah.
happens via that. And I'm like, I mean, as early as two, right? Like being like, "No," and then having the full conversation, and you thinking your 2-year old is not involved, but they're definitely engaged with you, right? That's one of my
They
favorite
listen.
things.
Absolutely.
Like,
Absolutely.
I mean, you say this, and this summer, my child had she had the opportunity to go to like a summer enrichment camp in Wake Forest, right? And they had like at the end of the camp, they had
Cool.
a prom where you got to dress up and go with the people. And my daughter goes, "Okay, I want to dress up, but I'm not putting on no dress." And as you hear my child in the background go, "I hate them." And so, it's okay. But
Get it.
right, she goes and she has like a flower button up. She takes one of her daddy's shirts and she thugs it. Right, like it's one of my favorite photos, and she has this like look down pat, but that's because one of like her godparents is, I mean, an amazing person, but definitely trans, black, sometimes gender nonconforming, but she moves, and it's one of her favorite people. So she was like, "I want to go,
Oh,
yeah, like insert here," and she was like, "Word, what?" Like, and at first, our kid kind of like
that's
looked at us and
amazing.
was like, "This okay, right?" And we like, "Absolutely, like, duh, like what?"
That's
And I say
amazing.
this because, go
And
ahead.
to your
I
no,
was
you
just
go
saying that,
ahead.
like, I was saying that in terms of now, mind you, like the mother of my child is like a Southern black woman, so like dresses are a thing, but we believe that gender expression is also a thing of black people. So you get to do your things, and it's like that was a negotiation that was actually initiated by my daughter. Right, like, hey, we want to wear
Yeah,
these things. I want to do this. We like, all right, but that's something that usually I know that's not something that's honored at a young age in some other black household, right? And then
Mm.
sure.
I
Or
gotta
any
say,
household.
I'm always gonna put my hands up and be like, I don't know about a whole bunch of other people's households, but I do know about black ones. And my favorite thing to be like is like, wow, my kid is actually changing what black households should look like, starting with mine. Right.
That's amazing.
And I want to speak to something because there might be some resistance coming from listeners. And my firm belief is our role as parents is to guide and facilitate the people in front of us as they are unfolding and blooming, right?
Mm,
Because they are their unique people. And as to your point, our kids can either be conditioned by culture and the norms of society and the power structures of society, or they can be conditioned by curiosity. And you say, inserting your opinion, sure, but just asking questions too
sure.
that get them to start thinking. Because I believe, and I know that we're in alignment here, at least I think we are, that by encouraging the next generation to always ask questions instead of being knee jerk in their reactions, that's where change occurs, regardless of which identity category you're
Sure.
talking about. Where if we're promoting a culture of awareness, curiosity, rather than judgment and knee jerk reaction to violence,
Yeah.
that's where we can create these possibilities from the impossible.
I mean, when you say that, it's like I think about that in a very literal form. What does it mean for you to not want to beat your kid, discipline them whenever they make you angry? Because that's what actually happens. It's not like they
Yeah.
break some rule and then next to the rule it say ass whooping. That's not what occurs. What actually occurs, it'd be like, ooh, boom, and then whatever you did has hit my limit, my zenith. I'm on your cheekies, and then you commit to doing whatever you're going to do. What if that engagement was mediated by the patience that you have with said child? Even it is that, hey, I need 5 minutes away from you. You have picked
Yes.
my things. Parenting situations usually look like high fiving and you're tagging the other one in. That's like the best case scenario. But we know that parenting gets exhausting. So, like, what if both of y'all are exhausted and the kid has hit the zenith? Do you have an
Mm.
emergency escape plan for how to engage that part? And it's usually like the I've like I guess studying over the years, it's like there's a couple options. You either do it as a team, you solo dolo it and tell your team member to shut up, or you leave. Right. And so doing it as a team also comes in gradations. It's like I'm pretty sure y'all have to finagle. All right, look, which one of y'all gonna get the baby today? Like, I'm tired. Hold finger, hold head, and be mad. Like, Right. And so, that negotiation doesn't stop when your kid gets older, right? It's more, it becomes more expensive. It's not just about, is the baby crying to be fed, comforted, or change the diaper. Now it is, all right, I don't know if I can take our child screaming about this math homework for the umpteenth time again. Tony, you got me? Tony be like, yep, I got you. And then come through with the, all right.
If it's math, that's not happening. If it's math, that's not happening. That's
I
all her.
got
But
you.
yeah, we picking up what you're putting down.
For sure. But I like, look, I say this with all kindness. Shout out to the mother of my child, because the online schooling that occurs, if she wasn't here, my child would be behind, because the level of patience that I thought I would have had, she has, and some, and I don't have,
Mhm,
not even close. Um,
mhm,
but this is also to say that my bandwidth functions in different spaces, right? Like, sure, I'm not the
Mm-hmm.
homework parent. I wish I was a little bit more acclimate to do such, to be honest. But I am the parent who goes, all right, I can deal with emotional things. My favorite thing to deal with. Right. Besides the ones that are about reading, I still have my traumas about my dyslexia slash. I look at work, and as a writer, I go,
sure.
and I know that's just not good energy for my kid to be like, I don't know. I know that to be true. And so we try to produce the best
Yeah,
energy for said child. But I also know I'm one of the biggest cheerleaders, right? Like, I'm a cheerleader to the mother of my child, definitely. Because there's things that she do that I can't, or that I'm not available for,
sure.
partly because I'm in San Diego at times. I'm in school doing the things or writing in San Diego, and they're here. Having to depend on her in a lot of ways to be able to make up the difference. Um, and it could be simple things like FaceTiming me, right? Like, being able to maximize
Mm.
the space and the time is really, that's how we make it work. Otherwise, this would be way more stressful. That, and we tried our best to affirm each other as parents, and through our own systems, like developing those systems and affirming those is kind of where it's at. Like, the other day we was laughing with our kid, about her, I guess, childhood nursery rhyme. And oh my goodness, it's because it's not a conventional nursery rhyme. It's like, but it's a nursery rhyme for the parents. Like, since she was like really high, it was, and don't get it, like, I'm gonna try to get it as perfect as right. Um, no, we don't want to hear all that in our ears. No, we don't want to hear all that in our ears.
No,
I know you want to
I'm
scream
not
and
gonna sing
shout,
it.
but we just don't want to hear it. No, no, don't want to hear all that in our ears. All right, and then you have the second parent join in. No, we don't want to hear all that.
Yes,
Don't
I
want to
want to
hear
hear
all
all
that.
that.
Now, as you know, this is
I
hilarious
love
to
it.
you all because you know what the words are. But the fact that you say it with such a sincerity and a, like, literally like on some lullaby kind of feel, them kids are going right to sleep to it, and
Yeah.
it's hilarious. But a part of that is keeping your
Hmm.
joy and the energy between the parents, right? Like, the mother of my child came up with that song,
Yeah.
right? Obviously, it's a spinoff of a old Negro spiritual or whatever. And so, like, whole time she kind of like jerry rigged it, if not nigger rigged it, to be like, we're gonna do a thing. And I was like, oh no, you're not. Oh, that baby don't know what you're saying. That's funny. And just running with it. Oh my god. And it worked all until my kid was like 4. Like, it was great. Like, and so I say that to be like, yes, your resolutions to things might be unconventional, but because you have that parenting bond, your agreement to do whatever it takes for this child to be alive and healthy and to care and like to be a full person, because that's the goal from the jump. That means y'all can get creative with how you deal with what could be struggles. Like, that was the song we
I love
sung
that.
so our kid can go to bed, our kid can be eased. Like when she got her ears pierced, that guy singing it like the like the whole office thing. Like literally, like we had the whole office singing it, and they was like with it. Oh my goodness, it was hilarious. But I say this because those are the moments, right? Instead of dealing with a crying baby and then you just getting eyeballed because y'all in the airport, and it'd be like, all right, yo, I need this baby to shut up because I ain't getting no sleep neither. And these seats been too little for the both of us. This
Yeah.
wild. How you do that? You have a song that you kind of get to laugh at, and then everyone else who is hearing you sing this
Yeah.
song is also going to laugh with you. You are a good time as a parent, right? That's rare.
I
Mm,
love that.
mm.
Yeah.
And you
Absolutely.
talked about so many things in this most recent response that I want to echo. Number one, the importance of sharing in all sorts of emotions with your kids, right? Not holding back those moments where you are reactive, like where you've hit what you're calling the zenith point.
Mhm.
Um, and then that circles back to being able to come back to center and apologize if you've acted in a way that you don't want to see in them. But then also you spoke directly, without us even asking the co-parenting question, to the importance of systems of co-parenting. uh, we're running out of time here soon, but I do want you to talk specifically about what your systems are. You mentioned the FaceTiming element, but what your systems are and what, if any, specific measures you take to be united in those
Um,
systems.
what I would say, I guess, naming some more of the systems besides FaceTime. Shout out to Google Duo. Before FaceTime was a thing for us, definitely Google Duo did things. But besides the actual communicative tools, we must communicate, right? Like that communication was, if we didn't talk, remember all that's in our head individually. And so at least if our head seems like two people who are together about those things, it makes it so much easier because you can feel a lot of guilt and insecurity all by yourself. Right. And so for us, it was communication and ultimately trust. I can trust that my partner is going to do what it needs to be done with my child. I trust that my partner can handle my child all by themselves. I also trust that I can do that, right? Irregardless. So let's say, well, my child gets sick, and I mean really sick, where I have to come and get my child and still commit to the regular work week. I can. And I've situated my life to do such, whether it be the people, like I have roommates, right? Like whether it be my roommates are child friendly or whether it be my roommates have a relationship with the mother of my child. So like, that's not an issue when she says, all right, yep, I relinquish my child to you. Dear father, you are there. Yeah, sure. Once that happens, and it can happen within a comfortable space, right? It's not within guests. It's not within, I don't know, things that we do that also build that kind of trust and communication. And it's about to be weird, left field. Bear with me. Video games. I know it sounds wild, but video games. And I say this because video games require you to communicate. Like literally, whether it be you have a person who's it's just a one player game and you got two people with eyes on the screen slash someone who knows about the knowledge of the game but is not very usable with the joystick. The anything that requires the kind of communication it is needed to succeed, that's what you want, right? Something that motivates you like that. Video games for
Mm,
us did it, right? Like we played hours and hours of Diablo. We played, and I mean, this was like a 4 player game that we could play with our friends. All the folks who was help raising our baby kind of hopped on, and we would have conversations. But like that was a thing, right? Um,
mm,
and I say this because it is something that now my child does too. Right, like she's a gamer partly because when we game, we talk about real life things, right? And so that was the decompress
mm-hmm.
for a lot of it. Like them hours where you kind of stressing out and you want to beat up something, and it can't be neither one of y'all or the said child. Okay, cool. Go on a video game. We good, right? And so that was definitely a large portion of the things. I guess the last thing that I'll say here is, and I'm probably going to be weirded out about this, but I'm going to say it anyway, which is have a healthy sex life.
Hmm.
Partly because in these kind of instances, children become the primary focus for what it is to do, right? And so, and I mean, do all the things that help you have the healthy sex. Like you got to talk about what makes you feel sexy, and all of that changes when you will become a parent. Like you don't feel the same way, in that like maybe your lingerie don't fit, or you got a dad bod, and you're like, I ain't always look like this. What's going on here, right? Like whatever it is that makes you feel less sexy, right? That usually will show up in how you perform yourself in other spaces, including being a dad, including being a loving partner, right? Because you be like, oh, I want to get rubbed on, I want to feel loved and joy, and doing that as a fullness helps. Not only is it just on some raw energy business, and as a parent, you are in high strapping demand for energy, and sex gives you that. But to feel like you are loved while loving someone else, or loving the thing that you made while being in love with that person, also is another level of affirmation, right? And so I running back to you on some communication business, trust, healthy sex, and outlets, right? Critical.
Outlets that foster community and problem solving. In the gaming scenario,
Absolutely.
you're working together and you're talking about the real world stuff that you're facing at the same time. So it's both an outlet and a space by which to process what you're going through that's not pressure
Yes.
packed. And I'll even add, like, the sex isn't about sex necessarily, it's about practices that promote intimacy, connection, on the level of you and your co-parent, your partner, that is separate from being a parent, because that's the most important thing in order to make sure that your relationship thrives outside of the management of the
I'll
child's
loop that
life,
again and
right?
say
And
that, for example, instead of being like, hey, partner, you're going to cook tonight, both of y'all get your ass in the kitchen and do that. Whatever it is, even if you suck
Mhm.
and all you do is like chop up vegetables and that's it. What I've learned from my partner is that presence in that kitchen is something that changes the experience. It changes not you not feeling like you have to solo dolo these kind of experiences of parenting, especially when
Mhm.
you thought, well, I'm going to do it with someone else. If you're co-parenting, that togetherness moments, whenever you get a chance to do them, you should do them. Now, granted, this kind of spills up into, having sex later, partly because you were good to your partner, right? They now have the energy to
Yeah.
commit to you when everything else is said and done, and they're not exhausted because their kid done ran them ragged because you let them rock, and you was like, well, that's your gender role, and you're supposed to, whether it be explicitly or tacitly, the participation matters, right? And so one of the biggest things
Mhm.
that like yeah, one of the biggest things that happened via co-parenting was understanding how much energy you put into things that are not the parenting or yourself directly, and looking at how much energy you would like to cut off from those things. Like if they're not pouring into me and mine, it got to go. Right. Doing that
Yeah.
before your partner says, I need you, critical. Because otherwise,
And I think that's on an individual level, that's one of the most important takeaways from the show, is that without protecting your energy and marking out boundaries and having outlets, you will almost never or rarely show up as the version of yourself with your partner or your child that you want to, or that you have the intention of. And I want to zoom out a little bit from parenting to get back to your talk, and I want to kind of talk on more of a macro level, or like a societal policy level, because at the end of the day, our country and the world is rife with conflict and division and oppressive violence. But I do think you and I have talked at length about how change in this capacity, and your talk is about dreaming of possibility, um, that reshapes the power dynamic and makes the world a more integrated place to live for people, especially in your talk, you know, Black kids. So, two questions. Number one, in what ways do you believe that activists, advocates, and policymakers can best engage Black parents to create those spaces of possibility. And then you specifically talk about what it means at the end of your talk, which gave me chills every time I listened to it. And I encourage every listener to go listen. By encouraging people to take a leap from one moment to the next. So I'd like you to specifically talk about what you mean by that
I'm
exactly.
sure. I would start at the leap question and then go to like I guess the material implications to some of the things. For me, I think that when we're leaping from one moment to the next to produce nearby nigger futures, I think that it's really critical to, I guess, hold on to what produces the conditions for impossibility, right? In particular, when we're thinking about Black life, what is the thing that produces us from imagining the fullness that we could from certain life? And so holding that into account, being like, all right, what do they say is impossible? Starting at all the things that we're not supposed to be able to do, right? Starting at ne pas, right? If all you French people, like, yes, no. And then taking it and being like, but I have to live. So what am I going to do? What am I going to do in spite of that? Right. Those leaps are also a question of having audacity, right? I love Black people. They shoot, they produce things like a conversation around having the audacity to do something. And for me, I think it's a really big challenge to have the audacity for the leap in the first place, right? The leap means that you're going to leap from, well, here's what my parents did, to here's what I'm going to do in spite of how I was raised, right?
Mm.
That for me is the dare that then informs everything else. Like, I know that my folks loved me. Can I dare to love my child differently, right? For me, it is taking the next steps to be like, all right, look, I'm unsure as a parent. I'm shaking in my boots. I don't know, but I'm gonna try for my child. Right? That is exposing your child to things that you haven't done because you haven't done them actually. Right? It is pushing your child and you into space and places that are good for folks in general, but you just never took the time to engage in. Right? And I say this because what does it mean for you to be like, all right, I think that um insert politics around racial issues or poverty issues is something that my family is going to have pride in. So you take your kid at a very early age to go in those places with you and do those things, right? The mother of my child likes to like remind me and her child all the time that like she was raised by civil rights folks, right? Which also then conditions how we have our conversations in our home, which is, yes, just like the NAACP folks was in folks' home having real political conversations about things, that is not adverse to, for example, our child being purview to those same things, because as a child, she was dragged to those same events and sitting on the floor with her grandparents being like, all right, cool, I'll be a child that's listening but not seeing, and doing all of those same effects outside of those spaces. So it's not that it's a formal NAACP meeting that we then have political reverb with our children or our loved ones. But instead, it's just when we sit down and watch random television show that kind of spark this, or we actually cut the TV off and we're chit chatting about the things that are on our hearts. Granted, some folks that's like a kumbaya circle, but it really could just be a Saturday afternoon, to be honest, right? And so to say this or
Mm.
to put this in motion with what do I think that material implications in terms of policy or activists can do. I think the activists are different than policymakers, and I think the activists can produce behavioral modules, meaning that like there's things that we can role play in our activist spaces to help us deal with conflict resolution. For example, I think that those things are very much skill sets that if you're planning to be a parent, you need how to deal with conflict, whether it be from your significant other or with your child, right? That's really important to be able to not only deal with unforeseeable events slash things that occur, but you're going to get angry. Anyone who don't think that they're going to have conflict when dealing with other people is selling themselves short and probably being irresponsible to the people that are around them. And so as far as activists is concerned, teaching folks how to deal with conflict and how to deal with racial antagonisms, meaning that like these kind of like people describe them as microaggressions, but there's nothing really micro about them. But these racialized instances where they seem like they're underneath the carpet, they seem like they are, for example, judgment issues. When people look at someone else and be like, I know you're the type of person that does X because of how you look, those kind of relationships, especially when racialized, do a severe amount of damage, given that, for example, this can happen at the simple level of your kid is the darkest one in the room. Right. For Black parents, this is a concern slash a concern that they don't necessarily want to have given like language to, right? Because there is no political solution to people hating on darker skinned people than other folks, right? Like, I don't know what policy to give to you for that. But what I can say is that in terms of Black parenting, this shows up in a juridical nature. Right. When I say this, it's like Black parents are definitely going to court for disciplining their children at higher rates than other parents. Right. And so, I mean, and I say this because one of my greatest, like, one of my oldest friends and one of my best friends is definitely having to deal with something of the sort. Right. Whereas the court is like, hey, yo, we're going to dig into your business and we don't like how you parent and we're going to readjust how that works by sending you to jail. Right. My point here is not to say that he's innocent or guilty or whatever, but the way in which the law engaged him, which was we don't care what the details of the situation are, right? As long as there is a child and you are a man, we're going to remove you and put said child with mom. Right? Don't care what the mom has on her plate slash rap sheet or whatever. We're just going to do those things. For me, I think that this impossibility question begs, all right, look, can you, after getting this charge, still be a daddy that's worthwhile? Because you definitely got a harassment charge, right? Like, how can you then still be good enough for your kids, right? My work begs and challenges you not quitting on your children, right? Because the state has marked you, because you have entered yourself into a situation that is it's not reversible via the state. How do you then move on from here? How do you then have healthy, meaningful relationships with all of those children in that household? A part of that for me is daring yourself to do that work. It is having the audacity to be like, all right, I fucked the money up, but I'm gonna get it right, and not just saying it in name, but actually moving towards practices that are bettering one's communication, that are bettering one's, build like literally like mental health kind of business. For me, I think that law could just be a whole bunch more lenient, for example, on how those things work and produce or provide counseling. And not just here's how you be better parents counseling, but like person to person counseling and time management counseling, because that is usually the things that overwhelm being a parent, right? Parental care is usually finding the space and energy to care after being a full adult in this world, right? And so being able to do that, I don't know if the law can manage those things, but what I do know the law can manage is the repercussions as a result of not doing those things well. Right. And so I'm like, yeah, sure. If they could alleviate anything, the penalty, because your penalty don't do things to discourage parents from being bad or good. Right. But instead, we have to work with the people to be better than before. Right. That is the leap that we're talking about here. Right. It is not to say that values of better or good are relevant here, because they're not. But different definitely is something that we can measure. Different is definitely something that we can like be like, all right, before, now, right? That is so much more useful than better or good, because better and good are relative. Like, I don't even know what to do with that. You can literally say I did better than last time and do the same thing just a little bit different. That's not okay. That is a bare minimum. right? And so thinking about how to do different, you just got to push it. Go ahead.
Well, and I just want to piggyback on the question of the audacity to care about the child, but also about being reflexive enough to know that, for example, the state has marked me in this charge, or for example, I've acted out in ways that towards the co-parent or the partner or the mother or toward the child, having the audacity to care enough to build the skills to stay in that situation and work through it. You know, what I would say is setting some of being able to set the past what it is and learn it as a lesson, and meet the moment as some opportunity to place that child first, right? And to do what is necessary to take care of yourself and build the skills so as to not repeat the past, right? And there's so much to talk about in terms of your overall talk, and I feel like because our conversation went in so many other meaningful, important directions, we did it a disservice. So what I'll do is I'll put the talk in the show notes so that people can see the link and go view it. But are there other ways that people want to engage your services as a communication consultant? Obviously you're a busy guy, co-parenting, going to PhD school, but if people want to follow you and benefit from your presence, which I know is so tangible and such a unique gift, where can people
Well,
do that? How can people follow
currently,
you?
my Facebook is public. And so Ignacio Victor Evans at Facebook, you should be able to find me. Wonderful Nose Ring, I'm here. And yeah, I entertain all types of questions. I do seminars, forums. Like Tony said, I'm a consultant, and so if you need me to pop up and have a presentation for you all on parenting, blackness, or anti-blackness, I'm your guy. But thank you for having me, Tony. Yeah.
It's the pleasure's all mine. Like I said, there's a cliche: people are in your life for a reason, a season, or a lifetime. And even though it's been so many years since we've connected in person, I consider you a dear friend and somebody that I always look up to, respect, and admire, not only because of your presence in the debate world, but also just because when we're hanging out, I feel safe to be who I am, and I feel safe to learn from you. And I know that people who are listening will feel that same safety and security. And I also know that as you move forward, you will continue to take that presence you have as a person and a parent and a partner and do magical things in the world. And I know that people will continue to benefit from your unique talents and gifts. And I'm so grateful that we got to have this conversation and showcase some of the remarkable things you're doing. So I want to continue to wish you well in the march toward the dissertation and the PhD. And of course, we'll stay in contact. But thank you so much for showing up as a guest. And we hope you stay connected with us.
Yeah, invite me back. We'll definitely have future conversations. Thank you for the opportunity.
Wow, what an episode! Thank you for listening. We hope you took some meaningful tools and skills that empower you to become your highest self in every way.
We also hope you'll help us spread our messages of solidarity, social support, and consciousness raising by subscribing to our YouTube channel at Mindful and Fit and offering us an honest 5-star review wherever you listen to podcasts.
Doing so helps more people hear these important messages of love, healing, and becoming.
And as always, much love from the Johnson family. We hope you make today amazing,
Just like you.